This might sound a little provocative, but I just wondered on how much cost 200 Boeing planes, and the figure was about 23 to 25 billion dollars. And then checked on how much HIMARS MLRS mm, missile launchers came are in the deal for Taiwan, and about 100 HIMARS um, launching systems, which are it's a track and launcher and a packet of missiles, and 100 of them, and they cost about $11 billion. So China actually helped to US to arm Taiwan like twice.
I mean, I don't know if that's a good way of looking at it because China buys a lot from the United States. So they buy soy, they buy oil. Do you want to basically attribute all of that to arming Taiwan? I don't think that's a accurate way of looking at it. Somebody could actually look at the opposite of that and saying China getting closer and closer to United States and being beneficial financially to United States makes the United States become less, make them both more interdependent, and makes the United States less eager to provoke China with the Taiwan issue. That's another argument that some people are making. Because if you have so much financial ties, two countries that have a lot of financial ties don't want to piss each other off. So I'm not saying that that's the case. I know the United States is interested in defending Taiwan, but it's not a black and white thing, it's a spectrum. And there are many people argue that President Trump's closeness to the CCP means that is the reason why he doesn't as support Taiwan as aggressively as United States did before, right? I mean, the support is always there. Obviously, Taiwan is very important, but Donald Trump's support for Taiwan has become more conditional and skeptical and transactional compared to how it used to be before. So let me actually look at this. Rather than offering a traditional or guaranteed security blanket to Taiwan, his approach treats Taiwan as a strategic and economic bargaining chip. So here's some. So for example, following his high-stake Beijing summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping, Trump openly stated that pending $14 billion U.S. arms package to Taiwan is being held up because it is a very good negotiating chip in dealing with China. So it used to be like more unconditional than this. You know, when the U.S. looks at Taiwan, supporting Taiwan, right? And then also, Trump explicitly warned Taiwan against pursuing formal independence, stating that he does not want the U.S. to travel 9,500 miles to fight a war. He emphasized that he wants both sides to cool down and maintain the current status quo. And then we also have the Trump administration has heavily pressured Taiwan to quadruple its defense budget to an unprecedented 10% of its GDP. This is actually very good. I like that. I think Taiwan needs to become more. President Trump, with using this language, has made NATO member countries spend more on their military. This is good that President Trump is also making Taiwan spend 10% of its GDP. Holy crap, that's like really high. So that's roughly $100 billion, raising deep anxieties in Taipei regarding the reliability of the U.S. as a security partner. By the way, this is very true. Regardless of whether I know some of you agree with this or disagree with this regarding President Trump reducing its support on Taiwan or making it conditional. But whatever your opinions are, we have polls that shows that's what the people in Taiwan think. The people in Taiwan are thinking that U.S. is not backing them as much as they used to. That's that. Even if you disagree with these points, that is how people in Taiwan are feeling regarding U.S. support for Taiwan right now. And then We also, oh, this is very important, reshoring microchips. Trump continues to demand that Taiwan's world-leading semiconductor industry pack up and move to the US, telling reporters that getting chip makers to migrate to America is the greatest thing you can do. So while Trump's administration maintains the formal U.S. policy toward Taiwan, and that remains unchanged, his rhetoric and actions indicate he views Taiwan's through a business-like lens, condition, conditioning military support on trade concessions from China and major financial or industrial compliance from Taiwan. Again, I don't see, like a lot of people think that's an anti-Taiwan thing. I don't think that's an anti-Taiwan thing. I actually see that maybe that's actually a pro-Taiwan thing, because I think that removing the what are those wheels called, like when you're biking and the child is on and you have those eight wheels that aid you not to fall. What is it called?
Training wheels.
Training wheels. Removing training wheels on a bike is like on the bike of your child is not you wanting them to fall, right? It's actually making them more able to do the thing that they're supposed to do. So I think that's actually maybe actually a more long term, a more pro Taiwan thing, in my opinion. Yeah, the training wheels. Do you guys agree with me, by the way? Write in the chat if you agree with me that this is just a removal of training wheels so Taiwan could become more self-reliant. But yeah.
Oh, oops. Okay. Sketch, you're next. Yes.
We have a law that says we have to back them. Like, it's written into law. It's beyond presidents. Like, every president has to report on problems with Taiwan. We are directed under the law to provide material support and defense, military aid to Taiwan. It's good sales. They make a lot of money. And if they make a lot of money and buy a lot of guns, that's a lot of jobs, because we're not letting anybody else make this stuff. So there's that side of it. The president, I think, is of Supermicro, which is the biggest chip manufacturer in Taiwan, got arrested recently because he was sending stuff to China. I believe that was also in the news recently. Like, I think he would talk like he's not going to do it when he's in China and then sell it during the campaign. As we're selling Taiwan a lot of guns, big guns, beautiful guns like you wouldn't believe this stuff. And they're being manufactured right here in the US of A. That's a lot of jobs. I believe all this stuff that we're going to stop selling. No. We're going to keep selling them stuff. But right now, we might, take some and like move them over here. Maybe you get some new stuff. Maybe you start working more with Japan, your neighbors over there. Maybe you guys start coordinating more with the Philippines, coordinating more with all these people, because another thing that we're doing in the South China Seas is making deals with all of these people and doing like we're doing with Israel and UAE. We're becoming the coordinator. We're becoming that eye in the sky, right? That's saying, hey, this is what's going on. You can attack from here. These people are moving over there, that kind of thing. And we're seeing how flexible they are, because some people were upset at the missile batteries moving. And I can understand that as like maybe there's a probability, but I believe the statistical probability was more of a worry of a beginning pattern than a single action leading to an effect. You understand what I'm saying? Like, people in Taiwan are afraid that it's going to become like NATO, like we're trying to decouple, which is not what I think is happening. What I think is what's happening is we were reallocating resources in a temporary fashion and maybe getting rid of old stock. Maybe the next missiles they're going to get are even better than the ones we took away. You understand? That kind of thing. That's kind of what I'm seeing there, because there's a lot of new defense packs all over South Asia. And I see nothing in the tech that they're talking about, in the defense strategies that they're talking about, and in the uniting of all these South China nations that have problems with China. Nothing of our coordination of dealing with all of them together makes me think we're backing off Taiwan. It seems to be a keystone in our efforts in the South China Sea, as much as Japan is, more so than any other nations around there. Maybe Australia too, but that's a little far.
Thank you, Jeffrey. You can respond.
I mean, when it comes to Taiwan, I think Sketch touched on it. which is you have strategic ambiguity, and that's because we're having to deal with three areas of geostrategic importance that are now active. So Putin's criminalized counterintelligence states and belligerency in Europe, the Chinese Communist Party's belligerency in Southeast Asia, and all the stupid shit that the Mullah regime, now Mullah regime remnants, is doing in the Middle East. As far as like what our position is, again, Sketch touched on the law. Secretary of State Rubio made it very clear that the U.S. policy on Taiwan has not changed as of today, and that the arms sales decisions are still up to President Trump and Congress. So what's kind of going on? One of the things we looked at, me being one of them, with regards to the fact that Taiwan produces 95% of the high-end microprocessors, or maybe just microprocessors in general, in the world. And this was back in March of last year, right? Because you see increasing amounts of Chi-Com belligerency across the strait, violating Taiwanese airspace, all this other stupid shit that the Chi-Coms are doing. How do we sit there and move this critical industry away from the potential, and in many cases actual, line of conflict? And so we looked at trying to like move the ones that are there. That is almost impossible to do because they're on the ASML, like high-end ultraviolet laser lithography machines are some of the most temperamental and sensitive machines built by human beings. And you couldn't even, there's only like 1,000 people that know how to take them apart or put them back together. And even if you did all that, you try to move it across the ocean, by the time it got to where they are, they would be worthless junk because all the stuff would be disaligned almost irrevocably. So what's the goal? The goal is to ensure that whatever production does happen, first is to onshore alternative productive means, and or whatever productive means that Taiwan is looking to build is produced here away from the line of conflict. So that way we don't have to worry about it. It's like a indirect way of supporting Taiwan. I would contend that Taiwan needs to get nuclear weapons. And I've been pushing for that in the open for almost 6 years now. If you want to invade Taiwan, eat 100 warheads. Let's see how you're good at being a superpower then. That's all I probably would need.
Thank you, Jeff. Armin, you are the last response on this topic, and then we'll move on.
Okay, so with regards to having a law to back Taiwan, again, I was talking about the level of support. I wasn't talking about whether we support them or not. That's why I keep saying that this is not black and white. This is not binary. This is a spectrum. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. And also with regards to the law, so this is the Taiwan Relations Act, the TRA, passed by Congress in 1979. This law requires the U.S. to provide Taiwan with defensive weapons, so it has the means to protect itself. It also states that, so basically this goes in line with what President Trump wants Taiwan to do, to spend more on buying weapons. It doesn't mean that the United States is going to come do your war for you. Yes, like so basically telling Taiwan to buy more weapons is completely in line with this TRA, the Taiwan Relations Act. It actually makes America be able to sell more weapons, right? So it also states that any attempt by China to determine Taiwan's future by force is a matter of grave concern, it uses those words, to the US. So the TRA has strategic ambiguity, meaning the law intentionally leaves out any guarantees of direct US military intervention. This dual purpose gray area is designed to deter China from invading while discouraging Taiwan from officially declaring independence. So US position since 1979 is it's just the status quo, right? And then following Donald Trump's recent high-stakes summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping, a bipartisan coalition of U.S. lawmakers issued formal letters urging the administration to strictly uphold the TRA. However, while the law forces the U.S. to sell weapons to Taiwan, Deciding whether to physically go to war remains entirely up to the president and Congress. There was two other points. So so when you say uniting the South China Sea countries, that actually reminds me of the Abrahamic Accord. So the United States is trying to do a pivot away from the Middle East, and that's one thing that the Abrahamic Accord is for. The Abrahamic Accord is to try to get the countries in the Middle East to figure the shit out themselves without the United States always having to be there. So, given that the Abrahamic Accord means that United States is trying to pivot away from the Middle East and just empower the countries there to do this themselves, I would think that, okay, then uniting the countries around the South China Sea is not necessarily a contradiction from the US trying to basically get these countries to support themselves rather than United States having to be there for them all the time. Like, it's not a contradiction from United States reduction, not removal, not complete stop, but reduction of support from Taiwan, which again, I don't think that's an anti-Taiwanese position. I think that might eventually, if that's the strategy, I think too much reliance on the US weakens a country, right? Too much reliance on the US weakens a country. I think it's actually a pro-Taiwanese position to have, to get them to spend more of their GDP on buying American weapons and to get Japan, Philippines, I don't know, Vietnam, South Korea to figure this shit out a little bit themselves. It helps them grow, right? That's good. These countries many countries spend so much on so many programs instead of their military because they are too reliant on the US military. It's good to remind them that, hey, you guys need to figure this shit out yourself. You can't just be waiting for United States to come fix your stuff for you, right? Also, when it comes to what Rubio says, Rubio is always more eager to defend. You can't when it comes to talking about the Trump administration. Obviously, Rubio is going to always sound more aggressive and more supportive of countries like Israel and Taiwan and I guess Cuba, I guess Venezuela. So that will always be there, right? So if we want to judge what the Trump administration's position is based on what Rubio says, then we're going to get the most hawkish comments from Rubio, and that's why we love him. But I just want to say, like, quoting Rubio is not really like, I mean, if somebody quoted JD Vance as the Trump administration position, I wouldn't feel like, well, JD Vance is part of the Trump administration, but quoting him is not necessarily the best accurate way of describing the Trump administration's position. That would give you one extreme on one end, and in the same way, quoting Rubio would give you the other extreme on the other end, right? So we have to take that into account.